Hello and welcome to Antinatalism this week. We start with the news for those in Budapest. A new meetup is arranged to specifically discuss antinatalism on March 5th in Budapest. It's about 2 hour session to explore birth and antinatalism at the intersection of philosophy, demography, politics, and technology. This session explores antinatalism through thinkers like Schopenhauer and David Benatar. But this is no longer a purely philosophical session. Today, birth rates are collapsing across much of the world. States intervene through incentives, restrictions, and population engineering. Technology separates sex from pregnancy and reproduction from the human body itself. On the meetup page, it lists 20 questions which will be discussed. This ranges from whether you would like to be born again, consent argument, whether someone can be said to be better off not existing, etc., to practical ones like eugenics, state policies around reproduction, and structures of family, and so on. So, this sounds like an interesting session to attend if you happen to be in or around Budapest on 5th of March. John Ostrowick is a PhD from Cape Town University and works at Department of Justice and Constitutional Development in South Africa. He has written an article criticizing antinatalism which says unpublished draft. He makes a number of accusations against antinatalism and Buddhism before providing some good aspects of pronatalism. But while doing this, the article makes many crucial mistakes which are easy to see. John confuses between instrumental value of pain, suffering, harm, or evil to its intrinsic value. For example, pain is a necessary factor in biological evolution in natural selection. So John says if we deny pain, we are denying evolution and life itself. John confuses between existing lives and starting new lives. He criticizes antinatalism because it leads to extinctionism. Also, most people feel happy about their lives, so that justifies starting new life. Antinatalism is elitist, he says, in the sense that antinatalists decide what is good for other lives. They don't recognize the diversity of joys people experience. Antinatalism stems from individualism and ignores the relational aspect of human lives. Antinatalism is eugenics because it thinks that people who will suffer should not come into existence. Suffering is only man-made, and so it is not entirely unavoidable. He provides examples of how things have improved. For example, we have fewer wars in 21st century compared to the last century. Life expectancy is rising across the world and so on. So antinatalism and even Buddhism, which says that suffering is inevitable part of sentient existence, is nihilism. Pronatalism, on the other hand, is a virtuous act. It assumes that sentient beings have an intrinsic value. John, at many times, talks about the worldview rather than the person affecting view. That is, that a world which contains sentient beings or sentient moral agents is better than a world with no sentient beings in it. And so, procreation is a moral requirement. Pronatalism recognizes our relational existence and gives meaning to our lives in building communities. He agrees with Elon Musk on preservation of the universe and expansion of the consciousness within it. You can see that all of these points make no sense. This was a poor quality article and a whole response could be made to it. But the risk is it is unpublished, and I suspect it is so because of its quality. A research paper, Lay Beliefs About the Badness, Likelihood, and Importance of Human Extinction, was about how people view human extinction. This paper asks a simple but profound question. What do ordinary people think about human extinction? Do they think it would be bad? Do they think it's likely? And do they think preventing it should be society's top priority? The researchers conducted 5 studies with over 2,100 participants in the United States and in China. Do people think human extinction would be bad? Yes, most do. Around 2/3 of the participants in both countries said extinction within next 100 years would be bad. Very few said it would be good. When asked how bad it was, the average answer was, well, above the midpoint. So, why do people think it's bad? Main reasons were loss of all human progress, failure to protect future generations, the suffering involved in the event. Interestingly, even when extinction was imagined as painless, most still considered it bad, suggesting the loss of humanity itself matters to many people. But do people think extinction can be prevented? Yes, again. over 90% of participants believed humanity could at least slightly reduce the extinction risk. They saw governments as the most capable actors, followed by companies and institutions. So the public does not think extinction is inevitable or completely uncontrollable. How likely do people think extinction is? Surprisingly, high. Median estimates in the US 5% this century, median estimates in China 15% this century. Most people believed the chance was at least 1%. So people do not dismiss extinction as negligible. Do people think that extinction prevention should be the top priority? Here's where it gets interesting. When asked in isolation, about 63% said extinction prevention should be the very highest priority. They also believed society should spend far more money on it than it currently does. But when forced to rank it against other issues like homelessness, healthcare, poverty, education, law and order, extinction prevention ranked below several of them. It was seen as important but not the single most important issue. Participants were asked how likely would extinction need to be this century for it to be very highest societal priority. The median answer was around 30 to 40%, meaning that the probability of extinction should be more than 30 or 40% for it to be given the most priority. That is dramatically higher than their own estimate of 5 to 15%. So most people believe, yes, extinction would be terrible. Yes, it's somewhat likely, but not likely enough to outrank everything else. Now, this is not strictly about antinatalism. Non-procreation could be one of the many means to extinction and could be lesser of the possible evils. The study did not consider this directly, but the fact that even though people think that extinction would be bad, they prioritize other issues over extinction, those which are generally related to suffering. The bad news is that this prioritization depends on very low likelihood of extinction. If the likelihood is increased, then avoiding extinction becomes a priority. Maybe there must be a study which differentiates between the means of extinction rather than just extinction being good or bad. Laura Carroll was interviewed on The Dissenter. Laura is an internationally known expert on child-free by choice and a vocal critique of pronatalism. She is also the author of books like The Baby Matrix, which was published back in 2012. In this interview, they talk on a lot of interesting subjects which are mainly about child-free people and sit only on the periphery of antinatalism. They talk about how child-free people are not against the children that already exist, those who are childless by circumstances versus child-free by choice, whether child-free people regret their decision and whether those having children regret having children, difference between the instincts for sexual desires as opposed to wanting to have children, also about what pronatalism means, how we live in a heavily pronatalist society, how infertile women are shamed, the political ramifications of pronatalism, the intersection of pronatalism and opposition to immigration, pronatalism and eugenics, pronatalism and reproductive rights, and so on. All in all, a nice hour-long interview with light-hearted topics, nothing too deeply philosophical. I actually listened to it while I was stuck in traffic, which is ironic on some level, I guess. Lawrence interviewed Silly in his Antinatalism Around the World series. It's a nice hour-long chat about how things are in Nepal about antinatalism. Nepal is a Hindu majority country, and like any religious communities, it is very pronatalist society. Of course, Silly being from Nepal would know a lot better about antinatalism there, but I should also say this. There are some stereotypes of Nepalese people who migrate to India. One of those is that Nepalese people are watchmen and security guards in many residential housing societies. Of course, they come from a very poor background and do jobs which are laborious and filled with injustice. I have dealt with a few of these so-called Gurkhas. That's what they call them here. I know it's a little racist, but people do call them Gurkhas. Overall, they're nice people, cooperative and helpful, but I have always come across Nepalese men who live in extreme poverty and usually have more than one child, sometimes even 5 children. Anyway, coming back to Silly and his interview, they also go over the recent African Nepalese Film Festival where Sagor Islam got an award for his antinatalism film No Dice. And then they talk about the recent unrest in Nepal and the attitudes of younger generation towards procreation and so on. Nice interview, Lawrence, as always. Jude's Pondarium made a video explicitly talking about David Benatar's arguments for antinatalism. She goes through the axiological asymmetry and the quality of life arguments but makes some mistakes. One, she does not consider that pain and pleasure are just examples of benefits and harms. If she considers this, then a significant portion of her criticism is answered. Secondly, she confuses between existing lives, which seek meaning, as opposed to starting new lives, which have no interest in seeking meaning before coming into existence. So, some erroneous points put forth, but still a good video, which will trigger some food for thoughts. Beyond Pronatalism is a podcast by Population Balance, and the recent episode hosted by Nandita Bajaj was an interview of Parker, who is a medical student in the US. Parker, who is now 22, has had a vasectomy when he was 18 and knew about not wanting children since he was a child. In the podcast, they talk about why Parker decided to go for vasectomy, the difficulties he faced in getting it done, living with vasectomy in a comparatively conservative region, I mean, he's in Florida, and so on. One aspect that they talk about is not only how easy vasectomy is for men, but also how helpful it is for female partners of those vasectomized men. And through that, they talk about how having children is thought as a sign of masculinity and pronatalist attitudes towards these things. And those were some of the updates on antinatalism this week. Thanks for watching and see you next time.